dudes and dudettes. Now, I know you're probably wondering, hey, where's Chris at? Where's the guy that normally does these videos? Well, your main man Mordecai here is kind of filling in for him. Chris is a busy guy. He's got a lot going on. But don't worry, I've looked at the research, he's handed me some notes, and I think I'm going to try to give this thing a shot. I don't know much about the game. Trust me, with Benson around, I don't get a whole lot to do at work. But besides work, I don't get much off time unless, I'm relaxing. But I think I can give this thing a run. So, for all you out there, welcome. This is the Week 8 recap and the Week 9 preview for the Fantasy Football Stock Report. I just want to say thanks for Chris for letting me fill in. I mean, obviously, he can't find just anybody to fill these shoes. Well, but, Anywho, I'm going to give it a run. Now, he told me that he likes to break things down by position for you guys, and that you guys really seem to like that a lot. So, we're just going to go right in and start with the quarterback positions from the last week. Hopefully, with these tips that I give you guys, you'll be able to win your fantasy weeks this week. The top quarterback from Week 8 was a non-shocker. Well, at least from what I've heard from Chris, at least what he's told me. It was Drew Brees of the Saints. I mean, the guy is simply incredible from what I've heard. He put up 43 points last week in his game. And this week, he's got another great matchup. Now, from what I heard, the Jets just completely got carved up by some team in Cincinnati last week. I mean, that's really kind of crazy. But looks like Brees was 26 of 34 for 332 yards, and he threw 5 touchdown passes. If I remember correctly, that's a lot of touchdowns. And oh yeah, had a rating of 146.1. Pretty sick if you ask me. If I were a Drew Brees owner, I'd keep rolling with him this week going up against that Jets defense. I believe that Cincinnati's put up 49 points on him. So, just my humble opinion, but I would keep going with that. Another quarterback that looks really good on this list, and from what Chris has told me, has put up amazing numbers in the last few weeks, is Andy Dalton of Cincinnati. Look, the guy is just red hot on fire right now. He was 19 of 30 last week for 325 yards, and he also had 5 touchdown passes. 4 to 1 guy. This Marvin Jones guy, hey, look, I've at least had a chance to see the guy play. If you're hurting at receiver and you need some help there, Marvin Jones could be a guy to get off the wire. But Dalton's had 30-plus points, at least from what I've read, in the last few weeks. He's a guy that certainly you can plug in and be a helper for you. Because here's the thing I was also told, there's still 6 teams on bye this week, including a lot of talented teams. So there's a lot to look for there with guys you can get. Now at this point, in all likelihood, Dalton's probably not available in a lot of your leagues. But certainly, if he's out there, there's no telling what you can do with this guy. He's got a great, decent matchup on Thursday night against Miami this week. Now, Miami, kind of an average team from what I've been told. Haven't been stellar, but haven't been great either. So certainly, I think you can keep rolling with Andy Dalton, especially if your starter is not coming through for you or he's resting this week on his bye week. Other guys that had good weeks, I mean, what more can we say about Cam Newton? The guy is electric. He's fast. He's shifty runs. He had 11 carries last week for 50 yards with a score. But also, he was 23 of 32 for 221 yards with 2 scores for 31 fantasy points. Now, I believe that Chris told me that also he lost to the guy who had Cam Newton in his league. And he regretted not starting Andy Dalton over Matt Ryan. I think Chris is taking a tip from that this week. A, don't face the guy that has Cam Newton. And B, definitely sought the hot hand Andy Dalton over Matt Ryan, if you know what I'm saying. Yeah. So Cam Newton going up against Atlanta this week. From also what I hear, Atlanta's pass defense, not exactly the best. So I think you can still roll with Cam Newton as a solid starting option this week. Now, you're not going to have the likes of guys like Peyton Manning or Colin Kaepernick or even Matthew Stafford, who, by the way, looks pretty good in blue, if you know what I mean. I like the color. What can I say? I like the color. But Yeah, these guys are all on bye this week. They had over 28, 29, 30 points last week, but you can't have these guys this week. You got to bench these guys and keep them on your bench. You know what I mean? You got to keep these guys reserved and find a better option out there. In all likelihood, you're not going to find Aaron Rodgers, who, again, continues to put up great numbers, even with the depleted receiving core. He put up 26 fantasy points last week. So you can keep rolling with him against Chicago. Tony Romo of Dallas. The matchup, from what I hear, couldn't be better for him, going up against a terrible Minnesota defense that I saw give up 44 points last week in the late game. Ooh, boy, that Minnesota situation is rough. Not only is it cold up there, but their defense is just as frozen. Whoa! Anyway, you should definitely keep going with Tony Romo. And Alex Smith. Hey, we can't ignore the fact that the Chiefs, from what I hear from a little bird, are 8-0. I mean, they are just outstanding. And going up against Buffalo, who, by the way, just got carved up by the Saints, you can keep rolling with him as well. Now, a guy that I think that I've really looked at here, a name that I think I've heard before, but not quite sure what to make of him yet, is Jason Campbell. I remember when this guy was playing a long time ago. And while he wasn't great, he's not exactly flashy, he put up 24 fantasy points last week. Now, granted, I think no one's really starting him yet because, well, he was just getting a starting nod in Cleveland last week. So this week, going up against Baltimore, not a great matchup, but again, if your starter, one of your main guys, is on a bye, there's no reason that Jason Campbell possibly can't fill in for you and play a pretty darn good role. So again, maybe if you're desperate, I would rank him as sort of like a number 2, number 3 play. But again, just a desperate play. Other guys to look at on this list here, Russell Wilson of Seattle. Kind of a rougher week this week, not normally what you would expect from him. Hey, St. Louis, you got to give credit to the Rams. I think they played pretty good defense. What I saw, they were stacking that box every single time. I mean, just stacking it and stacking it like sometimes the grass grows back in the yard. It's just stack and stack. But they did a pretty good job on him. He only had 18 points, but that's still a pretty decent week. Little tougher matchup again this week as well against Tampa Bay, but I think you still can keep rolling with Russell Wilson. Again, especially if he's your number 2 guy and your main guy is on a bye. Obviously, in that matchup opposite him, I don't like Mike Glennon at Tampa Bay. Again, I've seen that Seattle defense play. Ooh, boy, are they tough, especially at home. And I think they have something there called the 12th man. They're pretty loud from what I hear. So I don't like him. Carson Palmer of Arizona. You're not going to have him this week. He's on a bye too. You need to sit him. Terrell Pryor of Oakland. Ooh, couldn't ask for a better matchup for him this week. Going up against that Eagles D that just got beat by the Giants, and especially with Pryor's running ability, which looks pretty awesome. He had 9 carries for 106 yards and a score last week. That's pretty impressive by Pryor. So I would definitely say he's a starting option this week as a solid, maybe number 1, number 2 guy. Again, especially if your starter's on a bye week and you have Pryor on your bench, it's a great week to plug him in this week. You won't have Chad Henne of Jacksonville this week, but considering how bad I've heard the Jaguars are, why would you want to? Ryan Tannehill of Miami, I don't like his matchup this week. He's going up against that Bengals defense that, oh, by the way, just completely destroyed the Jets. I don't like that at all. And after that, it's a pretty big drop-off. These guys, I wouldn't even consider starting. Christian Ponder of Minnesota, Ben Roethlisberger of Pittsburgh going up against the Pats. Matt Ryan, like I mentioned, going up against Carolina. That's a tough defense. Plus, he threw 4 picks last week and cost my man Chris his fantasy week. I mean, come on. You just don't do that to the guy, Matty. What's wrong with you, man? Eli Manning, he's on a bye. You're sitting him. Thad Lewis. And dare we say, yeah, Chris even put all this information to me. Dare we say that Tom Brady is not worth a start anymore? Even going up against Pittsburgh, whose defense hadn't exactly been great all year this year, he's not a great option. He was only 13 of 22 for 116 yards to the touchdown and a pick last week. Even though he got his main man, Danny Amendola, back this week, he's not doing much with it. He's throwing touchdown passes to Aaron Dobson. Who? Yeah, I don't even know who the guy is. So after that, really big drop-off. Don't like it there. Oh, I got to get used to this mouse, so forgive me. Oh, man. All right. So that's the quarterbacks for the week. Let's move on to running backs. These guys, from what I hear, make up a meteor team. In a CBS league, you start 2 of these guys. So these guys should put up big points for you. Now, from what I hear from Chris, we talked about the top guy a lot before, and he's filling in nicely in the Arizona backfield, and that's Andre Ellington. From what I hear, it looks like all signs are pointing to the fact that he's going to finally leapfrog Rashad Mendenhall as the starter there. They gave him the rock, and he showed what he could do with it. 15 carries for 154 yards with a touchdown. That's 21 points. Unfortunately for all you Ellington owners, you're not going to have him in your roster this week. No, because the Cardinals, unfortunately, are on a bye this week. So you won't have him to use this week. But I tell you what, going forward, Andre Ellington is definitely the back you want to own if you're looking for a guy from the Arizona Cardinals and a guy that kind of fits into what Chris tells me is kind of a dual threat player, a guy that can definitely run while at the same time be involved a lot in the passing game as well. Darren McFadden to Oakland. When this guy's healthy, from what I hear, he's pretty darn good. Last week, 24 carries for 73 yards with 2 touchdowns. That's 19 points. That's a huge week for him. And going up against the Eagles this week, whose defense has certainly not been the best this year, I think the Raiders, from what it looks like to me, are going to have a solid week this week. I would definitely start your Raiders. Start Pryor, McFadden, even some of their receivers that we're going to talk about, guys like Denarius Moore. I think these guys are going to be huge for you this week. Normally, you probably don't rely on your Raiders a whole lot, well, maybe except for Pryor and McFadden. But these two this week are going to be pretty strong for you. Now, again, with a lot of team-owned buys this week, you're not going to have top guys. Guys like Noshawn Moreno of Denver, Frank Gore of San Francisco. Oh, he's a big beast. Reggie Bush of Detroit, again, the color. I love it. But you're not going to have these guys because they're all on bye this week, so you got to find some better options. Now, a guy that finally has seemed to be breaking out and is healthy again is Eddie Lacy in Green Bay. Oh, the concussion thing is past him, and he's back to being the main guy. He had 29 carries for 94 yards and a score. Also had 18 catches he caught all 4 of Aaron Rodgers' passes. When you have Aaron Rodgers throwing you the ball, from what I hear, it's pretty a good thing to have. He had 16 points, and he should keep rolling against Chicago, who, by the way, the Bears D, from what I hear from Chris, not what it used to be, okay? They're not even worth using right now, at least in my opinion. They're giving up a lot of rushing yards, so Eddie Lacy should do a great job for you this week. Alfred Morris of Washington, not a great matchup against San Diego this week, but as long as he stays the main guy, and that guy that I have behind him, I think his name is Halou, like Roy Halou or something like that, as long as he doesn't cut into his touches, Alfred Morris should be a solid number 2 option for y'all this week. Obviously, AP had another great week. I'm talking about all day. Adrian Peterson. I mean, I saw this guy from his recovery. Wow. He was definitely impressive to me. He had 14 points last week, and I think you can keep rolling with him against Dallas. Now, a matchup I don't love, just based on what I've heard about Tennessee's defense, is Zach Stacy of St. Louis. Now, while he is getting the bulk of the work, and he is the starter there, he had 26 carries for 134 yards last week. For 13 fantasy points. Tennessee's defense has been pretty strong from what I hear this year. I'm not impressed with the matchup. If you have a better option for your number 2 guy, I'd use someone else. But if you're desperate and have no other way to turn, if your guys are all on buys, maybe you can get away with starting Stacy as a number 2, number 3. I'm just not thrilled with the matchup is all I'm saying. Stevan Ridley, New England, love his matchup this week. Going up against Pittsburgh, he has the hot hand right now. He's toting the rock again the most times with 13 points last week. Keep rolling with him. James Starks, he may be Eddie Lacy's backup from what I hear, but he's still getting a little bit involved. He did have a touchdown last week on 7 carries for 57 yards. But again, that's the thing with him, though. He's only a backup. As long as Eddie Lacy is healthy, Starks is only going to get, maybe occasionally a few carries every other time. So, kind of worried about him. I can only see him as a number 3 or maybe even a flex play. I think that's the term that Chris told me, a flex play, which is someone you can kind of plug in as a dual threat or something like that for those guys moving forward. You're not going to have MJD. You're not going to have Maurice Jones-Drew this week. He's on a bye. Jamal Charles, I love the Chiefs matchup, by the way. The Chiefs are undefeated. They're playing the Bills. You need to start your Chiefs week. Well, except, I should say, there's one guy you probably shouldn't start, and that's Dwayne Bowe, because from what I hear, Alex Smith doesn't like throwing to the guy. I mean, come on. From what I've heard, Dwayne Bowe is a playmaker. I mean, why are you not throwing to him, Alex? Beside the point, I digress. If you're hurting at running back, Mike Tolbert of Carolina is a guy that I think has really started to break out from what I've seen. 7 carries for 35 yards this week, but he also caught all 4 of Cam Newton's passes for 29 yards and a touchdown. The guy now, I think, has had a touchdown at like 3 of the last 4 weeks, I believe. From what I've read, this guy is really starting to get involved in Carolina's offense. They're not worried about that Jonathan Stewart guy behind him. He's the guy you want right now in Carolina, at least if you already own D'Angelo Williams, who is the starter, or need some help there. Mike Tolbert could be a nice option. Again, going up against Atlanta, not impressed with their pass defense. So I like Mike Tolbert this week, and maybe even a bye week fill-in or a number 2, number 3 option for you. After that, again, a pretty big drop-off after that. I don't like Fred Jackson or C.J. Spiller of Buffalo going up against the Chiefs. Le'Veon Bell of Pittsburgh going up against New England, more of a number 2, number 3. Now, Daniel Thomas of Miami, I mean, Chris said he was really fuming over the Miami running back situation. He can't make heads or tails of this thing. He can't even flip a coin and tell you who's going to be the starting running back. I mean, is it Lamar Miller? Is it Daniel Thomas? He's literally like, I think he told me about the hair pullers. Like, he's literally pulling his hair out over this situation because he can't make heads or tails of it. But it looks like Daniel Thomas is getting more of the work, although they both had 10 fantasy points last week. So, again, it really all depends who scores the touchdowns, who gets a lot of the work. Now, Miller does tend to get more yards than Thomas does and more carries. But, again, Thomas is getting just as involved. So, maybe if you need, again, a number 2, number 3, or a flex play, either one of these guys could be good. But, again, I'm not impressed with their matchup against Cincinnati this week. I would really temper expectations on those guys. After that, take a look here. Monty Ball of Denver. Look, it's like Chris said to me earlier. He drafted this guy early in the season to be his number 2 running back, and he hasn't panned out. But here's the thing. He's taken advantage of an opportunity. He's been given a chance now, this Monty Ball, because Ronnie Hillman, from what I've been told, is a fumbling machine. He keeps putting the ball on the ground. People are diving on it. That's not good for Denver. Denver's a really happy pass offense-oriented team, and you can't be fumbling the rock. So Monty Ball, 12 carries, 38 yards, and a touchdown last week. I mean, again, maybe if you need a number 3 or a flex, he could be a guy for you, but he can't be this week, though. Maybe going forward, but not this week because Monty Ball is on a bye. Pierre Thomas of the Saints, I would start any Saint against the Jets. I honestly would. Even guys, obviously your must-starts are Breeze, Darren Sproles, Thomas, I would say, as a flex play. Lance Moore, maybe even this guy I've heard of named Kenny Stills as a number 4. Maybe you plug him in, or even a bye week fill-in if you don't have a top receiver from the bye week teams like a Demaryius Thomas or Eric Decker in Denver. You can plug this guy in and be a strong play for you. After that, again, big drop-offs after that. I would only consider these guys if you're desperate. Fozzie Whitaker of Cleveland, Kendall Hunter of San Francisco, of course, he's on a bye. Peyton Hillis of the Giants, he's on a bye this week. Brandon Bolden in New England, only a desperate play because, again, Ridley's getting a lot of the work there. Mike James of Tampa Bay had a rough go, but he's got even rougher time this week going up against Seattle. Real tough matchup. Don't recommend him either. And LaShawn McCoy, I think his nickname is Shady from what I've heard. Well, right now he's a shady fantasy play. Oh, because right now he has done nothing but be disappointing. He only had 5 fantasy points last week going up against Oakland. Tough matchup because Oakland tends to play better defense at home from what I've heard. Not fond of that matchup. All right, now here's one of my favorite positions because I love the guys that are fast. Wide receivers. Oh, I love these guys. These guys make athletic catches. They make great plays. I love the wideouts. And obviously the top guy, he seems to be the top guy week after week. And again, makes Blue look pretty good. Of course, I'm talking about Megatron. I'm talking about Calvin Johnson. You think I don't know who Calvin Johnson is? Seriously, like I said, I love Detroit. Calvin Johnson is the man. They don't call him Megatron for a reason because he makes amazing catches. Last week, no exception. He put on a show in Big D. 14 catches for 329 yards and a touchdown. Now, he did lose a fumble, so that put a bit of a damper on the day. But still, 36 fantasy points, that can't be ignored. Now, unfortunately, for all you Megatron owners, you're not going to have his services this week. Unfortunately, the Lions on a bye. Dang. Oh, right? You know, that's what we're thinking right now because we're just so upset that we don't have our Lions this week. But, as you always know, there's always maybe someone else out there that could be just as good for you to pick up. And maybe, in all likelihood, there's a guy out there in Cincinnati who almost equaled what Megatron did last week. Well, not in terms of yardage, but in terms of fantasy points, he equaled what Calvin Johnson did last week. That's Marvin Jones of Cincinnati. I had never even heard of this guy. Granted, I haven't heard a lot of these guys, but I had never heard of Marvin Jones to what he was able to do last week. He caught all eight of Andy Dalton's targets, 122 yards, and he had 4 touchdowns in the same game. I tell you what, it looks to me like he's going to become that number 2 option now in Cincinnati. And again, Thursday night matchup going up against Miami this week. Marvin Jones, now while he may not have this kind of output every single week, certainly he could be a guy potentially down the road that maybe you plug in as a number 3 with definite upside going forward. So Marvin Jones, really like him going forward because if he keeps developing this rapport going with Mr. Dalton, there's no telling what he can do going forward. Jordy Nelson of Green Bay, look, at least to me, from what's evident, the Green Bay passing situation, at least the receiving core, is a mess. A lot of injuries. But the healthy guys are taking advantage and stepping up. And as long as Aaron Rodgers is throwing to these guys, there's no telling what they can do. Last week, Jordy, 7 catches, 123 yards, and 2 touchdowns for 24 points. Another great week. As long as he stays consistent, he's a great option for you. You can keep rolling with him against Chicago. I've already said to start all your Saints, Kenny Stills, the rookie for the Saints. Yeah, a rookie. I mean, what a performance last week. Now, the only downside with Stills is that he's not targeted very often. He only had 3 catches for 129 yards, but he did have the 2 scores. According to Chris, he reminds him of a player named Devery Henderson, one that's kind of also that deep ball threat that's coming later in the game. So, again, you might not expect this production from him every single week, but going up against that Jets defense that just got absolutely torched by Cincinnati, I think you can get away with Stills as a number 3, number 4 option. I think he's certainly a solid look for you. Golden Tate of Seattle. I love these bird teams, if you can't tell. But, hey, Seattle's offense, from what I've seen, they're pretty darn good. And last week, 5 catches for 93 yards with 2 touchdowns, 21 fantasy points. Now, the only risk with Golden Tate is that once the team gets Percy Harvin back, who sounds like to me is going to be their main weapon, then Tate's targets are going to decrease a little bit. But a great matchup with Tampa Bay this week. The only concern you have with Tampa is that I've heard of this guy named Darrelle Revis. He's pretty good in the secondary, and he might focus on Tate based on this performance. But he might not be that good. You know, you might not afford to sit this guy just based on the fact of how good he's done. So looks like maybe you can put in Tate as a number 3 guy at least for the time being. Other top guys did really well last week. that you're probably going to start every single week. Josh Gordon to Cleveland. It doesn't matter who his quarterback is. He's putting up numbers every single week. Dez Bryant to Dallas. Hey, as long as he's not fighting with his players on the sidelines, Bryant lets his point total do the talking, okay? Emmanuel Sanders of Pittsburgh. Looks like he's starting to develop a little bit of a rapport with Big Ben there in Pittsburgh. He had 16 fantasy points last week, 7 catches, 88 yards, and a score. So, and maybe even had a 2-pointer there. So, you look at him, maybe again, a guy, if you don't have a top receiver this week, you plug in as a number 3 or a flex play this week going up against New England if he continues to develop this rapport with Big Ben. Now, again, you don't have your Broncos this week. You don't have Welker. You don't have Demaryius Thomas. So, again, you're going to have to find some guys, maybe even off the wire or guys you've had on your bench for a long time, that you're going to have to plug in this week because you don't have these top weapons. You don't have these guys that are going to be filling in for you. Stevie Johnson of Buffalo. This guy is entertaining to watch. He had 7 catches for 72 yards in a score last week. But again, with that matchup going up against the undefeated Chiefs, I'm not sure if I'm fond of that, but you probably can't afford to sit him. So I'm going to rate him a number 3. I'm just not fully fond of him. Drew Davis of Atlanta, more of a desperation play. Yeah, he had 5 catches for 77 yards and a score, but he's the first time I think I've ever seen him on this list, at least from what I've done in my research. And I don't like the matchup with Carolina. Terrence Williams of Dallas, you're starting all your Cowboys against Minnesota, okay? Just period. Minnesota's defense, again, I was able to see it. Whew, boy, is it bad. So you're definitely starting all your Cowboys. Dexter McCluster from Kansas City. This guy is, again, another one of those dual threat weapons, okay? This guy's another one that can make a lot of plays. He had 7 catches for 67 yards and a score last week, 12 fantasy points. And again, going up against the Bills, it's a great matchup. Again, the consistency thing, though, with him is a big issue. But I think, again, you can get away with him as a number 3 or a flex because he might be able to put up some decent numbers for you. Harry Douglas of Atlanta. Again, I don't like the matchup against Carolina with him. Not too sold on him. Now, Aaron Dobson, New England. First time I've seen him on this list, but not so sure on him. 4 catches for 60 yards and a touchdown last week. He did have 12 fantasy points, but this is the first time really that we've seen him really have a breakout game. And like I said, Brady's struggling. So not too sold on him yet. Maybe a guy that you put on, I think it's called a scout team. Maybe you put him on there and see what he can do later on. But right now, not fully sold on Aaron Dobson. Obviously, you're going to keep rolling with A.J. Green of Cincinnati. You're not going to have Larry Fitzgerald this week. He's on bye. Like I said, Lance Moore in New Orleans. I really like him this week. Not going to have Michael Floyd of Arizona. Antonio Brown of Pittsburgh. Again, tough matchup with New England. But, hey, as long as Big Ben's throwing the ball, I think you can roll with him. Ted Ginn of Carolina. I've heard mixed things on him. But, hey, Cam Newton's given him some targets. He had 5 catches for 80 yards last week. Again, more of a number 3 or a flex. Jared Boykin of Green Bay. I heard a lot about this guy. But he's gonna be involved. As long as those Green Bay receivers are injured, Boykin's going to have a great performance. So he had 8 points last week after coming off his breakout week. I think you can keep going with him against Chicago as well. You're not going to have Victor Cruz this week. The Giants are also on a bye, so make sure you bench your Giants. And again, after that, big drop-offs. Vincent Jackson, he had a tough go last week. Normally, he's pretty reliable from what I hear. He was targeted 13 times last week, but only had 5 catches on 79 yards. But you can't really afford to sit the Jack. Even going up against Seattle, can't afford to sit him. After that, again, big drop-off. Chris Givens, Brandon Gibson's out for the year with a knee injury, from what I've been told. So you can drop Brandon Gibson in Miami. Let's see, any of the guys worth mentioning here. Deshaun Jackson of Philly, probably can't afford to sit him against Oakland. Now, from what I've been told and from what I've heard, Nick Foles, the Philly quarterback, he's back. He's back this week, boys. That's right. His concussion is healed, so he's going to be back in it this week. So that's definitely some help for Deshaun Jackson this week. Let's see. You're not going to have Hakeem Nicks or Anquan Bolden. Make sure you sit them. Pierre Garcon, still, I think you could still roll with him against San Diego. He only had 4 points last week, but he was targeted 11 times, so you're safe with him. Steve Smith of Carolina, maybe more of a number 3. Not going to have Eric Decker. Mike Wallace only had 4 points last week. He's kind of an up-and-down receiver in Miami, and I don't like the matchup with Cincinnati, so not fully sold on him. Like I said, I mentioned Denarius Moore of Oakland. Love the Raiders this week going up against Philly. I like Denarius Moore as a number 3. The Rams receivers, like Austin Pettis, Chris Gibbons, with Kellen Clemens as their quarterback, not pretty. I don't like any of them. Brian Hartline. Now, Justin Blackman of Jacksonville, he's had a rough go the past couple weeks. He's been shut down, although he's still getting targeted a lot. I'm not going to have him this week because he's on bye. But he's the top receiver in Jacksonville. They don't have very many other options there because they're so bad. So you can keep rolling with him. And again, after that, it's just a real big drop-off. No names that I really jump out on the page to me on that list. You know what I mean? All right, moving on to some tight ends here for you. A couple tight ends, good tight ends are on byes this week, including my buddy Chris's tight end, Vernon Davis. He's on a bye this week, so you're not going to have him. Now, you will have Jimmy Graham. Oh, have you seen Jimmy Graham play? He's like a basketball player out there. Oh, wait, I think he did play basketball. Well, anyway, Jimmy Graham going up against the Jets. You're going to keep rolling with him. So, obviously, if you don't have Vernon Davis, Tim Wright at Tampa Bay is a name, again, I never even heard of before. But he's out there available in a lot of leagues. He had 5 catches for 48 yards and a score last week. That's 10 fantasy points. That's the 3rd highest scoring tight end. Pretty impressive for a guy no one even heard of before now. Tough matchup again, going up against that Seattle defense. But I tell you what, if he's out there, if you're in need of tight end this week, you can certainly put in Wright as a guy you can plug in. Jordan Reed of Washington, this guy has come out of nowhere in recent weeks. He had 9 fantasy points last week on 8 catches, 90 yards. Didn't find the end zone, but he was targeted 14 times. Dang, when you got a quarterback throwing you the ball 14 times, I think he's a pretty good important player in the offense, wouldn't you say? So I think you can keep rolling with him going up against the Chargers, whose D hasn't exactly been great this year. Obviously, guys like Jordan Cameron of Cleveland, Greg Olsen of Carolina against that Atlanta pass defense. You're starting these guys for sure. Scott Chandler of Buffalo. He was targeted 11 times last week. He had 7 catches for 72 yards, but Chris has told me that he's kind of a hit-or-miss play. And going up against the Chiefs, not a great matchup. More of a number 2, number 3 option. Now, the Cincinnati tight ends, Jermaine Gresham and Tyler Eifert, again, with Andy Dalton being as hot as he is, these guys you can plug in for a bye week replacement, or maybe even a number 2 play if you start 2 tight ends in your league. I really like these guys. Again, not fond of Kyle Rudolph from Minnesota. Brandon Myers of the Giants, you don't have him this week. You don't have Joel Dreesen of Denver or Julius Thomas. He's recovering from an ankle injury from what I hear. And after that, again, a pretty big drop-off. Brandon Pettigrew, Charles Clay, Jared Cook, not recommended option. Now, Tony Gonzalez, TG, I love this guy. But again, with Matt Ryan struggling and a tough matchup with Carolina, I really can't recommend TG as a play. You probably can't afford to sit TG, but if you have a better option or if you can get a better option off the wire, I'd recommend it. I'm just not fond of Atlanta's matchup this week. Gronk, Rob Gronkowski only had 2 fantasy points last week, 2 catches, 27 yards. Again, Brady's struggling. But again, you probably can't afford to sit him because you know how talented he is. So again, it's kind of temper your expectations on him, but we'll see what happens with him. But for now, you're definitely playing him against Pittsburgh. And again, after that, pretty big drop-off. None of the other names here I'd recommend. I talked about Eifert. Let's see. Heath Miller. He just hadn't been the same player since his injury. Zach Miller, Seattle, don't like. Now, Jason Witten only was targeted twice last week for 15 yards. That surprised me. But going up against Minnesota, it's a dream matchup. I think you can still roll with him. And, yeah, that's pretty much all that I have for the tight ends. Not a whole lot to dissect with those guys. All right, some kickers real quick to close out the show. I know Chris closes out with some kickers and defense that he likes. If you guys do something called a plug and play, where you pick different kickers and DSTs every week based on their matchups, here's some guys that I really like based on their matchups this week. Dan Bailey of Dallas going up against Minnesota. Again, I love the Cowboys this week based on that terrible Minnesota defense. Mason Crosby of Green Bay going up against Chicago. With Aaron Rodgers as your quarterback and the Bears' D being able to be run on, Crosby's going to get his share of opportunities. Ryan Suckup of Kansas City going up against Buffalo. Again, start your Chiefs. They're going to roll this week after that Buffalo defense just got destroyed by New Orleans. Stephen Gostkowski in New England. Well, even though Brady's struggling, that means that Gostkowski might get some more opportunities against that Steelers D. Let's see. Who else we got here? Don't like Zerline. Don't like Caleb Sturgis. Mike Nugent of Cincinnati. He's out there in a lot of leagues. He had 7 points last week going up against Miami on Thursday night. Great matchup if you want to get an early start. Graham Gano of Carolina going up against that Atlanta D. I like that matchup. He'd be a nice plug-and-play fill-in for you. And, of course, Garrett Hartley of the Saints. Hey, my buddy Chris just got him off the wire. So it's a great matchup against the Jets, and I think he'll get some opportunities for you. And finally, real quick, as we always do, or at least Chris always does. I keep saying we. I'm not sure why. But as Chris always does, well, now I guess it is kind of a wheezed up part of this, now that I've done a show on here. Gosh, I feel so important. Anyway, DSTs, Bengals. Definitely you can roll with them against Miami. They had a 30-point week last week. They're red hot as Andy Dalton is right now. You keep plugging with him. You're not going to have, again, the Broncos, Cardinals, Giants, Lions, Jags, although you probably wouldn't use the Jags D, but you're not going to have them this week. Don't recommend the Rams D going up against Tennessee. Now, the Patriots D against Pittsburgh, that's not a bad match, although the backlash of that is that Big Ben could go off and have a big old day. But I maybe like them as a number 2 option for you if you start 2 Ds. Obviously, Saints D against the Jets. You want to keep rolling with that. Let's see. Raiders D against Philly at home. Love that matchup for a plug-and-play for you. Seahawks D against Tampa Bay. Obviously, rookie quarterback, rookie running back. Love that matchup. Panthers D has been amazing this year. You can keep rolling with them against Atlanta. And let's see. And, of course, Cowboys D against Minnesota. I love that matchup, too. Chiefs D against Buffalo, obviously, is an obvious one. And that, to me, oh, and, of course, the Titans D going up against the Rams. That's a nice plug-and-play option for you, too. Now, they might be owned in a lot of leagues because I think they've been pretty solid all year. Ravens D against Cleveland is another nice matchup. Cleveland, again, Jason Campbell did good things last week, but he didn't have a whole lot of weapons there. So, again, and if you're looking for, again, another plug-and-play for you, how about the Colts D? Yeah, my man Chris's hometown team here. The Colts D going up against the Texans, who are starting a rookie himself, and a guy named Case Keenum. Don't know much about him, but apparently the Colts, a lot of people think the Colts D is just going to destroy Houston. So, you know what? That's it. Wow, in only 40 minutes. A quick show. Normally, I don't think even Chris gets it done that quick. But there was just a lot kind of to go over with some guys. With 6 teams on bye, there's usually not a whole lot to dissect there. but it was just a lot of fun to be a part of. I want to thank him personally for letting me be a part of this. I mean, it was just so awesome and just so exciting. So, it's been rad. It's been rad. Just about, oh, gee, what's going on? Yeah. Oh, wait a minute. I don't know what's happening. Ah, Surprise! Did you really? Did you really think? Did you guys really think that it was Mordecai all along? You guys probably know me by now. You guys know that for every year, for the Halloween time, I dress up. I gotta do it. It's fun. It's exciting. Whew. I tell you what, though, spending 40 minutes in this, not easy. Okay. But yeah, that was certainly interesting. For me, of course, to all of you, I don't know how you guys celebrate. I don't know if you guys still go out and get candy, like Jerry Seinfeld, get candy, get candy, get candy, get candy. I don't know how you guys do it. I love it just for the fact that, hey, once a year we get to dress up, be someone different, and have fun. That's really what this holiday is all about, avoiding the goons and ghosts and goblins and all the scary stuff and the horror stories and movies. Yeah, that could be cool too. It's not my cup of tea, all the horror movies, but I just love the camaraderie of it all. And fall is one of my favorite times of year because the weather cools down, the leaves change, and then it goes into winter, and while the snow's not fun to drive in, it's pretty to look at. So it's one of the most exciting times of the year. And it goes into bigger holidays like Thanksgiving and, of course, Christmas around the corner. So, guys, this was just a lot of fun to do this role, to have this look. I guess I've worked on the voice ever since I've watched regular show. I might not have got his character and personality down perfectly, but I gave it my best shot. So forgive me for that if you don't think it was perfect. Hey, we're not perfect in this world, though. We're not perfect at fantasy football, right? We have our stumbles, we have our mistakes. My team's lost 2 in a row now. I'm trying to make changes this week to get things back in the swing of things. So from me to all you guys who subscribed, to all you guys who watched, to all you guys who, if you have, chat with me or leave comments, thank you again so much, and good luck to you in week 9 this week, and have a safe and happy and wonderful Halloween. Be aware of the kids that are outside, and ESPN's mentioned this a lot. If you're in a car at night, be aware the kids are around, and just be careful. Be aware of them being out there, and just be careful when you drive. We don't want a kid to become a statistic on Halloween night. So just be safe. If you're having a party safely. If you're drinking, use a designated driver, all that stuff. Just be safe, and be cool. But at the same time, be cool, but at the same time, be safe. And by the way, with these hands, this is hard. Mordecai has 4 fingers, so it's kind of hard to get. I literally have 2 fingers in this one right now. But anyway, be safe, and just have a joyous Halloween night, and good luck in your fantasy leagues for week 9 this week. Thank you guys again so much, and we'll see you next week when the regular regular show. Get it? I just thought of that on the fly. When the regular me, not playing the Blue Jay from regular show, comes back next week for the week 9 recap and the week 10 edition of the Fantasy Football Stock Report. Thank you. God bless. Good luck this week, and happy Halloween. Take care, guys.